Welcome to Behind the Story, where we discover the story behind your favourite stories. My name is Lisa Renee from the Collab Press, and I'm also a rom-com author.
I'm Naomi Craig. I write historical fiction set in Bible times. We have a great interview with Johanna Vann today. Had a great time chatting with her about her debut, An American Immigrant, and I can't wait to get into that. But before we do, what are you working on right now, Lisa?
Okay, well, just briefly, I have recently done a Kickstarter, so I'm just fulfilling that this month. And one of the backers requested that they have their name in the book, but also, as in she gets a special edition, and she's getting hardback of the novella box set, but also a Zoom session with me to brainstorm for the next story. So this is cool. So the Kickstarter thing is, where you get to really get to know your readers. And I have to work it out with her, but yeah, I'm not even sure if she has read any of my books before. She's probably just someone come from Kickstarter. So it'll be an experience for her. And in my description, I can't promise that I'm going to use all their ideas, but we'll brainstorm she would have read the first book, the one before this, and like learning how we're going to make the story for a single mum. So we'll come up with the male character, we'll come up with the trope. And it's good to get in a reader's head, what they're wanting, what makes them turn the pages, and then I'll have obviously them in the acknowledgements, and I'll be the one doing all the work.
Yeah, but that's a really great idea. If you can get their input, then they're going to feel real special and help promote it. And
yeah, well, that's it. So you sort of do that with your newsletters. You put out surveys, vote on this title, or come up, or maybe Facebook book group. So this is taken to another level. So that's what I sort of like about it. And what about you, Naomi? How'd you launch? So tell us how it's going.
Yeah, it was great. I actually just got my book, so I'm really excited.
Beautiful.
So it's got some reviews trickling in, and I'm just so pleased with how it's being received. And actually, if you don't mind, I wanted to read the dedication.
Yes.
Here. This is for Carissa and Lisa. May the Lord bless your big dreams and bring them to fruition. You inspire me. So this is an international book hug for you. And of course, you're mentioned in the acknowledgement too. Because when I sent it to you and Donna and Sarah, it was a mess. It was a hot mess. So I definitely couldn't have done this book without you ladies. So
that's sweet. Well, I love the story and I love the characters, and I really thought, even though I don't know if you planned the guy character to sort of be on the spectrum, you could sort of see some traits there, and I just think that's really great to represent. So I'm a support worker, and I work with people on the spectrum, high functioning, and they function really high. They can be smart and everything, do great things, but they're brilliant. But they can misunderstand some things, and not necessarily get all the social stuff. So it's a journey for them. And I just really like how your main character, Shira, she's, understands and accepts him, and brings the best out of him, and he brings out the best in her and encourages her.
Yes, you know what? It's the intelligence level is so vastly different, because she's brilliantly, her mind is very scientific and lays out how you build a city, how you build a town. And then she really needs him, though, to soften her sharp edges, because she can be abrasive. If you've ever been around someone who has a big idea, and then it's like, whoa, from people like me, it's like, whoa, hold on, back off, but I think that's part of the story is yes, she has brilliant gifts too, and she needs to be using them, but also to look around to see what the gifts of those around you, and to work together. The Lord designed us to work in unity, so to really take advantage of everybody's gifts when you're working on a project or living.
It's a beautiful story. And the characters, it's not just, there's so many different characters, the brothers, the father, like the people around them, that the side characters also bring a story to life, and it just gives so much depth, And everyone out there, Naomi is an amazing writer. It's just like poetry. So it's just amazing, really engaging. So highly recommend it. So congratulations on all
Thank
the
you.
great reviews
If
coming
you
in.
like very small mentioned in the scriptures and you want to know stories about some of those those brief diversions from genealogy lines, and you might want to like Shira's legacy. You can find her story in First Chronicles 7:20 through 24, and so it's 5 verses to go off of. So.
So a lot of imagination there. So well done.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. What do you want to bring on our guest today?
Yeah, our guest today is debut novelist Johanna Vann. Be sure that you are subscribing to Behind the Story so you get wind of all of these great interviews, great book tidbits. We also we have a paperback of An American Immigrant to give away to one of our how do we want to do this one? Is this one on King Sumo, Lisa, or is this one in the comments?
Yes, it's a paperback, so it'll be on King Sumo.
Okay, so yeah, so make sure that you get into the King Sumo. That's in the comments below. Enter in that. That is for US addresses due to shipping costs. But yep, so I'm happy to bring on Johanna Vann. Johanna is passionate about stories that highlight the complexity and beauty of diverse families, but nothing brings her more joy than her role at home as a wife and stay-at-home mom. Johanna, welcome to Behind the Story.
Thanks so much for having me.
Wonderful. So for those who aren't familiar with you, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you write.
Yeah, well, my name is Johanna, and I'm a wife and I'm a mom. I live right outside of Nashville, Tennessee. I've got 2 little kids, and I write contemporary women's fiction, and my debut novel just came out a week ago.
Congratulations. That's so
Thank you.
exciting. So your debut is An American Immigrant, 25-year-old Melanie Carvajal.
Yes,
Nice.
Good job.
Melanie Carvajal, a hardworking but struggling journalist for a Miami newspaper, loves her Colombian mother, but regularly ignores her phone calls. Frustrated she is that she never quite takes the time to understand Melanie's life. When the opportunity arises for a big assignment that might save her flagging career, Melanie follows the story to the land of her mother's birth. What is the story behind An American Immigrant?
Well, the story behind it is actually my mother's story for the most part, which is really cool. So when I started hearing about my mom's journey coming to America and what even her youth was like when she lived in Colombia, I was in my early 20s. I was in college, and yeah, I got more and more interested as I started hearing different stories of her life. And I started writing them down. I started taking voice memos, recording her telling me stories. And it got to the point where when I would share the stories with other people, they would tell me, you should write that in a book. That would be a beautiful book. That would be a fantastic book. Wow. So that's kind of the story behind it. You know, I was collecting these stories for a while unknowingly. And one day, after so many people told me that, including my husband, I was like, okay, maybe I should write this into a book. And that's what happened. And so I wanted to share a lot of her story, but I also wanted to share the story of the daughter of immigrants in the United States and what it's like to grow up with parents who are from a different culture than you are from, because I grew up in the United States, very Americanized in a place like Maryland. But my parents were not. Both of them had lived in Colombia until they were in their early 20s. And so that was very much their identity and their culture. And so I wanted to tell that story of what it was like to have parents who are immigrants, who are from a different culture, speak a different native tongue. And so then I just put them together.
Any writing experience before that, or?
Oh, I did. I did have a lot of writing experience. I was a copywriter before I left corporate America. Yeah, so I studied journalism. I was a broadcast journalism major in college, and I worked in television for a couple of years out of college. And then I took a different route and I started doing copywriting for a little while. And then when I started having kids, I left corporate America and decided to play with fiction. I had never written anything like like the novel that I wrote, nothing like it. I am an avid reader and love to read fiction, but definitely had never written anything of this sort. So it was a big challenge, but it was a good challenge. I needed this kind of challenge, and it ultimately was super fun.
Good for you.
Wow. Yeah, that's sort of how I got into. I had a background with marketing, writing, copywriting, and doing that kind of stuff. But yeah, an avid reader, and then you want to represent, like I wanted to represent Australians in the American market, because it was just like all this historical stuff.
I love that.
But yeah, I had to also consider my audience, which majority is American. So I needed American characters, and then have that contrast of cultures, and yeah, and it's something different. Wow, that sounds really excellent. So introduce us
for some interesting, funny miscommunications, that's for sure, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So introduce us to Melanie. What are her strengths and her quirks?
So Melanie is tenacious. So she is in the book. She's probably in her early 20s, not probably, she is in her early 20s. And she is very determined to get what she wants. And she will almost do anything, not anything, but almost do anything. But her strengths are that she's a really hard worker, because she has a goal in mind and she's going to go after it and do whatever it takes, even if it means sacrificing her personal life, going out with friends, things like that. And so, but that ultimately also becomes some of her quirks, because, she turns out to be someone who doesn't know how to have a little bit of fun, takes herself a little too seriously, doesn't have a lot of joy and friendships in her life, because she's so hyper focused on a goal. So it's interesting how, sometimes your strength can also be your weaknesses. And that's definitely something I would say about Melanie. But as I hope readers see throughout the book, she is a very lovable person, and once you learn a little bit about her past, you kind of learn why she's so determined, why she's so tenacious at work, and really striving to succeed, and ultimately sacrificing everything else to succeed. So she's a hard worker, but also lovable and sweet.
Sounds lovely. It sounds like there's going to be a lot of relatable things for your readers as they're going through that. So you released out on August 15th, 2023 already. You've got some great reviews happening on Goodreads. M says, starting at surface level, Johanna's debut novel is a quick, easy, enjoyable read. Below surface level, though, that's where Johanna Vann truly shines. This novel is one part enjoyable novel, one part love letter to cultural identity, and one part homage to the value to getting to truly know your own immigrant story. Which part of that made you happiest to see the readers getting?
That is such a sweet review. Makes my heart explode. I would say the love letter to cultural identity. I think that's beautiful, a beautiful way to put it, because that's really what the whole book is about. It's about a young woman not only discovering her cultural identity, but truly falling in love with it and allowing that to shape what her life looks like in the present and the future. And something that I've been thinking about the whole time that I was writing the book, and even now as it's published, is I hope when people read this, I hope they want to learn more about their own cultural identity. And that doesn't just mean, people who have parents who are immigrants, or people who have this direct link to another country. My husband is from Alabama, and I want my children and I want my husband to do the same thing, to discover the cultural identity of the South. What is, I want you to dig deep and learn about your family roots, and learn about where you come from, the small town that you're from, and the foods that are specific to that place, and the dialects, and all those things. So I think it's a fun, I've heard people already tell me that, like, it made them want to talk to their parents and their grandparents, and cook the foods that their grandparents made in their home. And so it's truly a love letter to cultural identity, and I hope that it motivates people to write their own love letter to their cultural identity, no matter where they're from.
I love that. That's beautiful. So if you're watching, comment below, tell us something that's unique to your culture, whether that's your parents were immigrants or something that's unique to your way of life where you're at right here, right now. We'd love to see that in the comments below.
Yeah, and I'd also like to hear from any readers if you have done an ancestry test and what came out of it, and were you surprised? Because that's something you know, I've heard about, and I'm thinking maybe I should do one. So how do you feel discovering your ancestry can impact your future?
So many different ways. I'll never forget, a couple years ago, I was watching an episode of Top Chef. And there was this chef on the show who did really well in that season. And I remember him saying, you know, he was a Black man, and he said, I studied in all of these French culinary schools, and I went to France, and I worked in all these kitchens in France, and I really learned the art of French cooking. But it wasn't until I went home, and I think he was maybe from Harlem or something. It wasn't until I went home and learned about the foods from my culture and where my family's from, that I really became the chef that I was meant to be. And when I heard him say that, this was before I started writing the book, like right before, I was like, that's it. That's the book that I want to write. That's the story that I want to tell, because I do think that God created each of us very uniquely from, you know, from where we come from, our cultural identity, who our parents are, where we're born in the world. And I think it's for a purpose. I think it's for a reason. And who knows what that reason is but God. But I think that once we discover some of those, you know, go digging and praying and seeking and exploring, I think that we can find things that we will want to implement into our own lives. For example, once I started writing this book and really digging into my cultural identity as a Colombian American, I was determined I want my kids to speak Spanish, period. I don't speak perfect Spanish because I grew up in the United States, and my parents were the only people who spoke to me in Spanish. And my husband doesn't speak Spanish. So you would think like that's a huge challenge, but so far we're doing it. You know, I have a 2.5-year-old and a 1-year-old, and my 2.5-year-old primarily speaks Spanish. That's his first language right now. Even my husband is learning more and more Spanish because he's helping me teach our son whatever he can say in Spanish, he will say it. So anyway, that's an example of what can happen when you know, learn about your cultural identity or learn about your heritage. And all of a sudden it's made this huge impact on your family line, on the next generation, because all of a sudden my children, even though my husband is not Hispanic, my husband doesn't speak Spanish, our children will speak Spanish and will have the opportunity to pass that on to their children as well. So I think that's one way. But I mean, think about all the other things that someone might want to do because of something that they discovered. You know, I have a brother who loves to cook, and he would love to move to Colombia for a few months and learn from chefs in Colombia about how to cook our food. So I just think it can add so much color and vibrancy to your life, and just a lot of uniqueness. So why not, you know?
I think it's really cool that you're doing that when the children are young too, because they're so sponge-like. When I toured with Covenant Players, I stayed at a home in Hong Kong, and the mother she was from Switzerland, I think. So she spoke German. I think French was also. So mom only spoke in German to the children, and dad only spoke in his language. Plus they also knew English. They could speak to me, and they were in a Cantonese area. So, I mean, these children were just brilliant. But it was really interesting because when the child was saying something to me about his mom in the kitchen, he said Jacqueline for his mom, but in English, that's all he knew her as was her first name. So it was I'm like, I wish I had learned another language like
so
that
easy
when I was young.
When you're little. Yes, when you're little, you soak it all in. It's been amazing to watch.
That's really cool. So you mentioned Colombian chefs a lot, and I see on the reviews that their recipes are a big part of an American Immigrant. What is your favorite Colombian recipe that's mentioned in this book?
Ooh, I think it would probably be the arepas, which if you were to sit down and make some, you would think this is so simple. You know, why is this your favorite? it is so simple, but sometimes that's the best part of a meal, or that's the best part of a food. And they just bring back so many good memories for me. You know, growing up, my mom would make them all the time. It's like a staple. I mean, almost every day you have it with your eggs, you have it with your bacon, you dip it in your coffee, and it's basically just a corn cake almost, but my mom would put lots of cheese in it. So I loved that. As I was writing the book, I learned that my grandmother used to actually hand grind her own corn and make them completely from scratch at home for her 5 kids, which just is incredible, because here, you know, we just buy the cornmeal at the store and then mix it with water and cheese and fry it in a pan, and it's still delicious. But I would have loved to taste her, you know, from scratch arepas. But anyway, I think they're delicious and very versatile. You know, oftentimes they'll even be on your dinner plate with your rice and beans and you know, steak. But they're great at breakfast with coffee, and they're just versatile and delicious and kind of like a comfort food. So I highly recommend everyone out there go make some.
Well, you're making me very hungry over here. I bet people get hungry when they're reading your book.
Yeah.
Right. So I also wrote my women's fiction series when I had little ones at home, and people would ask me, like, how did you do it? You know, like, and I was homeschooling as well. So for those that don't know how that dynamic, you know, how do you find the time? And you've got such small ones, you know, how do you find the time for writing?
Yeah, it's honestly, I'll just be completely honest, it is so hard. I don't have childcare. I don't have a nanny or anything like that. So I'm with my kids all day long, and they're so little. Thankfully, when I worked on my first book, I only had the one child. So that was a lot easier because he was taking 2 naps a day. And so that's all I did while he napped. I would put him down in his bed and I would run to the computer and not get up until he woke up. And so that helped me a lot. And then I also utilized my local YMCA. I feel like I owe them $1 million, because I was there every single day. You get 2 hours of childcare when you're a member. So I would drop off my baby for 2 hours, and then I would write. I wouldn't even exercise. Like, I just went there to write. And it was so nice because they have coffee and tea and like little chairs and tables. So that was super helpful. But now that I have 2, it's a completely different ballgame. They're currently on different schedules. And so I have had to like hire a babysitter every once in a while. But other than that, you know, I really utilize my writers group. We do a quarterly retreat where we spend a whole day together from 9 to 5. And that's usually on a Saturday, so I can leave the kids at home with my husband, which is really nice. Or there have been times where I've had my mother-in-law or my mom come and stay with me, or me go to them so that they can hang out with the kids. And so I guess I kind of have to write in big spurts versus like a little bit here and there. And I feel like Stephen King would be so mad at me for saying that. But I can't, I right now in the season can't write every single day. Even if I'm an early riser, and I would get up at 5 a.m. every day and write. But my 2.5-year-old gets up at 5:30 every day. So I don't even have like early mornings to write. So it's been really difficult. I'm not gonna lie, it's really difficult. But the one thing I will say is, even if you have young children at home and you feel like you don't have the bandwidth, if there's a will, there's a way. You will find the way. You know, there were nights where I just stayed up after bedtime to write, or hired a babysitter for like 2 or 3 weeks in a row.
Wow, yes, I can totally relate to that. And there are writers out there it's just, you know, they're typing on their phone, they're doing speech to text. You could go for a walk pushing the pram and do a bit of speech to text, although it's a lot of editing afterward. But you can help get the story out. So like you're saying, when there is a will and when there is a way, you've got this story in your heart and in your mind, and the characters are talking, you're going to shut them up and get them out, get the story out.
Yes.
And I think you highlighted it too. It's a season. Like right now, this season is hectic. Maybe in a couple of years, you'll be able to be more consistent. But I think that's beautiful how you just roll with that, because what can you do? Like, this is where the Lord has placed you right now.
Yeah, you just got to enjoy the process. And I mean, I don't write every single day. I usually doing marketing, all sorts of things. And then it will be this month that I'm focusing on writing. And then, you know, it'll be months of not writing, and then another month, you know. So it's really just to your lifestyle and what works for you. But yeah, you're getting the stories out, and it's a journey. So well
Yeah.
done. Not everyone gets to complete a book.
Yeah. So is there something, Johanna, that you feel the Lord taught you while you were writing An American Immigrant? Besides the family things, like is there a spiritual arc that the character had to go through that you also went through?
Yeah, for sure. I would say that I feel like the Lord really showed up for me while I was writing this book, and he taught me that he cares about the things that I care about. So I was really determined to write this book and I was excited about it, but I also deeply felt like God was calling me to write it. I felt like he was pushing me to do it and asking me to do it. And throughout that process, there were so many moments where I was stuck in a scene or I didn't know how to get from one scene to the next. And I feel like the Lord would literally drop things into my lap. For example, there was one day where I was really stuck. I didn't know what else to add or what else to connect these two scenes. And I was talking to my mom, and she said, "Oh, by the way, I just found these poems that your grandmother wrote that I totally forgot." And I didn't even know that my grandmother was a writer. And so she sent me a picture of the poems. And when I read them, I was like, these are perfect for the book. These are the perfect connecting point to get me from here to here. And two of my grandmother's poems ended up in the book,
Wow.
completely unchanged. And so there were so many moments like that where one, I discovered something that I didn't know that was so beautiful about my family. But two, I really felt like God was telling me, I got you. Don't worry. Like we're gonna finish this book together. When you need something, just ask for it. I will help you. And I feel like the Melanie in the book, kind of the same thing happens to her, where she kind of tries to rely on herself so much, and she forgets about relying on God and relying on others as well. So I think that's part of her character development that I hope readers like to read.
Wow, that's really cool. And now your grandmother is a published poet
Yeah.
through you. So that's really cool. So a bit on a personal note, what is something people might be surprised to learn about you?
Oh, people might be surprised to learn about me. Well, I am a dual citizen. So I've actually never been to Colombia. That's not true. I went when I was a tiny baby. I was like 3 months old. And that was when I got dual citizenship. So I am a citizen of Colombia. I have a passport with my baby picture on it, like as a newborn. But other than that one time, I've never been, which is surprising because I wrote a whole book about it. And I really did want to go when I started writing the story, but the pandemic hit and I had a newborn baby, and I was like, I cannot travel to Colombia and get stuck in Colombia and not be able to make it home to my baby. So we had to put that on pause. But I do hope to go in the future. But I think people will be surprised to know that I've actually never been as like an adult person.
That you remember. All right, so this is a really serious question. You have
Okay.
been given a lifetime supply of the last thing you purchased. What is it?
Oh no. Okay, that's really funny because that would be today. I had to pick up sippy cups at Target. I don't need a lifetime supply of sippy cups, please.
Or maybe you can start a business if that happened.
That's
There
true.
and
Buy my book, you get a sippy cup.
yeah, for the mum readers out there. Okay, so tell us what's coming up next with your book writing. What are you writing a book 2 for this, a follow-up story?
Well, I don't have any plans yet to write a follow-up story, so we'll see. I do have a couple of ideas that are not related to my debut of books that I would love to write one day. But to be honest, I don't exactly know when that would be right now. As I mentioned, like life is so chaotic right now with 2 kids under 3 years old. And so I'm starting to think now that I just launched, I was like putting all my energy and focus on launching my debut. Now that it's launched, I'm starting to think about how can I get into a regular rhythm of writing so that I can write another book? Because I do want to write more books. I want to write more contemporary women's fiction. So we'll see. It's all TBD. Not sure if it'll be a follow-up or something completely different, but I hope it'll be a whole nother book real soon.
Well, good. So be sure that if you're watching this to follow Johanna, she'll tell us where we can find her. And then that way you'll know of all the things. So where can the readers find you, Johanna?
Yeah, so you can find me on any social media platform. Usually it's Johanna R. Vann, or my website is johannavann.com.
Well, thank you, Johanna, for sharing with our viewers today. And yeah, it's just been a pleasure to meet you, and it's very inspirational. So well done.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here.
So thanks for joining us today on Behind the Story. So don't forget to enter the draw for a paperback for US residents, and the link is in the show notes.
As always, we have our freebies listed. If you're interested in historical fiction of a not so well-known character, I have On Desolate Heights, Balaam's story, and that's free for my newsletter subscribers.
And I also have a free novella. It's in audiobook, or you can have an ebook form. The link is in the show notes. It's a Christian rom-com. And next we have coming up an author from the Trinity Lakes romance series. It's a Christian series, which I'm a part of, Sarah Beth Williams. We had her on the show very early in the beginning when we started Behind the Story. And she is amongst the one American amongst all these Australian authors in this multi-author series. So we'll get to see her experience of working with different people and dynamics, and yeah, how the series is coming along. So it'll be really great. She's an amazing writer. She's one of our critique partners. So we've known her for a few years, and she writes amazing, engaging, very romantic stories with strong Christian themes. So it will be great to have Sarah on the show.
Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Behind the Story. Until next time, let us run with endurance the race set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. See you next time.